Great.
Okay, I'm officially calling the special meeting to order. And the special meeting is being called to review the final bids for essential air service for Manistee Blackfoot Airport. And we're down to 2 bids, and we'll go from there. Barry, do you have to say the other stuff you did before for recording this, or what?
I think you're good.
Okay. I'd like to keep this short and sweet today.
Would you like me to call the order, or the call roll?
Yes, I forgot that. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce, Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman, Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Jeff is on. He's now.
Mr. Dunce.
I'm here. Hello.
All right.
Hello, Jeff. Okay, we've
road
got,
somewhere.
say again?
I believe he's on the road somewhere.
Well, I
Could
see
be
him.
on his cell phone. Yeah, it could be on his
Okay.
cell.
He's there. So we'll go ahead and get going. We do have enough to conduct the meeting. And what I was saying earlier, we're getting together to make our final decision on essential air service for the airport. I presume everybody, or I hope everybody's gotten a copy of what Barry put together at our request, a final review of 2 potential carriers, because we basically eliminated the other 2, so we're down to 2. That's Boutique and Cape Air. And so everybody knows what I'm talking about, has gotten a copy of the analysis. I presume with no answer back, I presume everybody's gotten a copy of it and had a chance to review it. So
I think Barry has done a super job putting that table together. It makes life a lot easier. I think he's done a damn good job.
Okay. Well, Mark, what I'd like to do is let everybody make a comment on the review. Any other comments going around robin here? After we make all the review, we'll come back and do a vote as to which of the 2 carriers are here that we want to see come into Manistee. Does that sound like a reasonable plan?
That makes sense.
So anyway, Mark, you got the floor. Why don't you start?
Okay. I think, first of all, as I mentioned, Barry has done a super job for us. He's really made life a little easier, and I appreciate that very much. The summation there, as you can see, is Cape Air is a little higher than Boutique. The one thing that I wanted to mention is that Boutique is pretty much a south, southwest, and a west area. I don't know how many terrible winter storms they get down in that area, but my guess is there's not too many. And I wonder if the reason that Thief River Falls discontinued service with Boutique is the fact that I'm originally from North Dakota and spent time in Minnesota too. And I tell you, I have been in some nasty, nasty storms in that area, let me tell you. So I'm wondering if maybe there was more cancellations than Thief River Falls wanted to have. So I'm leaning towards Cape Air. I think Cape Air has met several categories in terms of this. You can write down through reliability. They're higher than Boutique on reliability. They're high. Let's see. Overall, they're higher. When you throw all of it together, it's 26.125. So I think, in my mind, it's the service up in our area and further north that's important. And I think the twin engine. I'm not a big fan of single engine. twin engine, and I like the twin engines. I think you never want to have to use it. I did read that paragraph that one crashed. It doesn't say if anybody was injured in that, but probably not many parachutes. So I don't know. But all in all, that's kind of my summary right there.
Barry, Karen just sent me a text and she said that she needs to be let in.
He is now. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So Karen, I will rename her. She looks like she's calling in on phone. And she's currently, oops, nothing's coming in.
You couldn't hear me on the phone?
Karen, I can see you and I can hear you.
Okay, all right.
Are we all set with everybody? Can we all see and talk to Karen?
I can't see her, but you know, I certainly can hear her.
Mark,
Yeah.
Mark, this is where I told you if you swipe the screen to the right, you'll see more people, I believe.
Oh, okay. All the pictures are just because I'm swiping it across and it's not doing it.
Do you see Karen then or no?
What was that?
Do you see Karen or no?
No, I don't. I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, she's here. She's here. We'll just continue on.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Karen, this is Jerry. I was just telling the folks, we just got started. I was having everybody just make a few comments on Barry's comparison of the two airlines, Peak and Cape Air. Then after we get everybody's thoughts in there, we'll do a final vote as to which airline we want to go with. I'm hoping that as we talk through this, some people will maybe have some questions that they might have had answered and may also raise a few questions, but however it goes, get those questions, thoughts resolved so we make that final vote this afternoon at the end of this meeting. So, Bill, you want to go next?
Sure. I would, my selection would be Cape Air because their bids are for the twin engines. Boutique has bid was for both single and twin, although I think they both put together a real good package because of the twin engine exclusively. That's what I would. I'm going to vote for Cape Air. Over.
Okay. Karen, you want to go next? Karen?
Muted.
Karen, you want to go?
Okay, I have to step out for real quick. Second.
Oh, you want to bypass or what?
Yeah, bypass.
Okay, Barry, you want to go ahead?
Assume you're talking to this Barry.
Yeah, that Barry.
It gets confusing once in a while.
Okay,
I thought the presentation by Cape Air was much more professional than the other ones we saw, and I think that'll reflect on how they run things. I like the aspect of twin engine aircraft over the lake, and the research and compilation that the other Barry did bears the facts out that they scored higher. It's close, but they scored higher, so that's my vote, Cape Air.
okay. Jeff, are you around someplace?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Cape Air. I hope I will remain a fan of Cape Air. And I'm also a fan of trying to get through the DOT the option to make a stop on the way going south in the early runs to Grand Rapids and on the way coming back as well.
Okay. So Jeff, you're Cape Air, right?
Correct, 100%.
Okay. Karen, are you back?
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm really kind of on the same page that Jeff's in. I really thought that Cape Air looked like a better option. I do like the idea of the new planes that they have, and they did say that they would start with us and bring those in. And at least that's what I thought I heard. I thought that they were really comparable, and I just think that they had a better business approach. It was a little bit more aggressive and assertive that they would be in here and making it work. So those are the things I liked.
Okay, good. Okay, Andrew?
Unfortunately, I was busy, so I did not get to hear the Cape Air presentation. I was a little disappointed in the boutique presentation. I thought that they tried to tap dance around the reliability response and the fact that there were some errors in their printed presentation. I was concerned when Barry said that they were actually losing some other EAS services, which would lead me to believe their reliability numbers aren't as good as they were saying. And then when Barry said that they had the crash, I Googled that and watched the YouTube video on that.
Wow.
And gave me a lot of concern about their pilot training because fortunately there was no passengers on the plane. It was just a pilot transporting the plane to another airport. But the pilot on the recordings and stuff didn't seem to really be prepared for the emergency and did not land in the most available airport and tried to go to a different airport, ended up crash landing in a field short of the airport.
Was the pilot killed?
No, he made it out and he made it to the hospital, but the YouTube video and the gentleman that did a review of the radar and everything did not leave me, at least, with a good impression of the training that the pilot received.
That's interesting.
Based off of my conversation with Jeff and what comments I've heard here, I'm in full support of the Cape Air. Plus, Cape Air was doing twice the marketing budget that Boutique was proposing.
Okay. I'll make a few comments here. First off, I'm favoring Cape Air to begin with. And I think just like I heard, one of the reasons was Cape Air has been in the business much longer than Boutique, actually since 1989 versus 2014. The other thing that I mentioned the other day and was talking to them, Cape Air does have a presence in O'Hare. Boutique doesn't. I think that's got a little bit of benefit to it. The other thing that I heard somebody else mention was that Boutique was operating in the northern part of the country, Minnesota, was not successful. They claim it to be because of pilot shortage and so on, which other folks have had the same problem. In fact, our current carrier had that problem, so we're well aware of that. But I think Cape Air is been addressing their pilot concerns better than the others. I haven't heard of anything significant about their pilot problems. Now, the other thing that Karen mentioned the other day with Cape Air, they are flying in a very, very similar countryside, terrain, etc., that we currently live in. I'm talking about upstate Maine, upstate New York, I should say, going into Maine, going into Vermont, New Hampshire, and so on. And the only thing that I kind of gives me a little prickle is what Barry pointed out with Cape Air and the scheduling going down to Grand Rapids and around. Because it's going to cost a lot more from the government to subsidize that, they may not want to subsidize us for that extra route to Grand Rapids. But I sure would like us to see to go to Grand Rapids also. And that's my spiel. And I'm voting for Cape Air. It sounds like everyone is voting for Cape Air. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Okay. Barry, any comments?
Yes, I do. Okay, I'm not on mute. So I guess what I'm hearing is consensus for Cape Air. Obviously, we haven't taken a vote yet, so we don't know that for certain. But I think then there's a discussion on which of Cape Air's two proposals, because there's proposal one, which is essentially 2 flights a day, 6 months of the year, and 4 flights a day, 6 months of the year to Chicago only for roughly 3.6 million. And proposal two, which is 2 flights a day in the off season, 4 flights a day. So it's the same number of flights, but one of those per day being a one stop through Grand Rapids. And that is roughly 4.8 million.
Correct.
So I think that is, maybe where the conversation needs to turn, so that ultimately the board can make a final decision on what they want to request of DOT.
Did everyone hear what Barry said?
I heard it, but I'd like to hear his reasoning.
Fill us in. What are you looking for, Mark? His reasoning for,
Well, he's talking about 2 different arrangements for trips to Chicago, I believe.
Right.
yeah,
Those are the 2 proposals from Cape Air. So in Cape Air's proposal, there's option 1 and option 2.
Yeah.
So you as a
Oh,
board,
yeah, here it is. Yeah. Yep.
right.
make
3.4 round trip flights versus 3.0. Is that right? Or
Yeah, they both have the same number of flights and everything else, Mark, except one, option 2 goes from here to Grand Rapids to Chicago.
Mhm.
Option 1 doesn't go through Chicago. I mean, Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids, yeah. And that's the more expensive one, and that is provided by Cape Air then, is that correct?
Correct. And more expensive in the sense that they have to request more from the government, or the government has to subsidize them more for the route going through Grand Rapids versus not going through Grand Rapids.
Haven't we been thinking about a trial case where we would try to go through Grand Rapids and see if we could build something up?
Absolutely.
So do we have the money to do the more expensive route to try that? I think Jeff was pretty much interested in trying to work something through Grand Rapids too.
Well, it will be the government that gives us the money to do it.
So we'd have to ask for additional funding. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
It's
Barry?
part of the bid process, and I
Right.
guess if we don't test those waters, we are never going to know. And I've been in communication with Congressman Bergman's excuse me, Congressman Bergman's office in regard to seeing, and FAA has not got back to them in a manner convenient for this particular meeting. So in absence of that, I would say all they can tell us is no, and we go to option 1, I guess, as opposed to option 2 with the Grand Rapids stops. But I think it's incumbent upon us to try to open up that door and see if we can get it. If they authorize it, let's give it a whirl.
I would say I would be completely in favor of option 2 for those particular reasons. We test the water and go for it and see what happens. Do I,
if I
any
could,
other comments?
I'll start. And I've tried to remain as neutral as I can on this topic. You've probably guessed from the comments I have made that I'm not in favor of this, but ultimately it's not my decision. I just want to make sure that the board is making an informed decision based on the facts. So I guess I would like to discuss why we're trying to do this and what we're trying to accomplish, because I actually believe that we will be harming our total number of employments by doing this, because we're going to make it more challenging for the majority of our passengers to travel. But again, it's not my decision, and I want to be a facilitator for conversation and provide what facts I have. But ultimately, whatever you decide is where we should go.
Well, Barry, I think you've added a great deal to the discussion here, and it makes me think twice now. This is sort of a test, isn't it? I mean, we're kind of, will this have some potential or not? I'm not one for throwing money away, and I know we've got something going now. So, and I tend to lean towards your advice, because you know a hell of a lot more of this than I do, that's for sure.
But again,
But I think it'd be a test. It'd be sort of like, can we do that? I guess we've never tried it. We talk about it, and it might hurt us on our own operations. So that's a tough one.
But again, I think the question we need to be asking is, what are we trying to accomplish in doing this? It's a test. How do we measure success? What is, again, our goal? And I think that's where we need to direct the conversation. So I would put that out to the board is, why would we want to be doing this? What is our goal? What are we trying to accomplish?
My initial thought is that it gives the travelers more options, and that might make our departure point more attractive. But I'd like more details on why you think that wouldn't occur.
I can do that if you want me to, or if others want to weigh in on additional comments.
Go ahead, Barry.
Okay.
Take 5 more minutes and
I'm going to bring up so part of the challenge is that we are right now operating in an environment that for aviation is going to radically change everything. So we don't really know what's going to be happening. And, so for example, over the weekend, I was reading a lot of articles from the industry, because the airlines are now kind of out of crisis mode and are now starting to plan. And, the federal government through the CARES Act has really provided funding to kind of see them through the summer season. But beyond that, it's kind of going to be the beginning of the new normal, whatever that is. For example, reading this weekend, United has communicated to their pilots to expect a 30% reduction in staffing. So they're looking to lay off 30% of all of their pilots come September 1st. They're indicating to their unions that that is possibly the conservative scenario and that it could be significantly higher than that. But essentially they're looking at cutting back at a minimum 30% of their flights. They're talking about closing hubs. They're talking about rethinking their entire operations as a carrier. So that's
is COVID-19 impact on this, Barry, or why are these major changes going on?
Driving all of it. I mean, as of today, the major carriers through June have cut 90% of all of their flights. The only reason they're basically remaining solvent is because of the CARES funding, which basically requires that they not lay any people off until the end of August or September, whatever the timeline on that is. So now they're starting to plan, what happens after that. So with that as the backdrop, we don't know what Grand Rapids will even look like as far as number of destinations it has. It could morph into something more along the lines of what it was maybe a decade or 15 years ago, with just service to the major carriers' hubs and, a carrier like Allegiant, who's actually expanded greatly in there, will they be able to survive this? There's a lot of unknown in where the industry is going. I'm saying all of that because I'm going to bring up something that kind of predates all of this. And hopefully you will now see a spreadsheet that's on my screen.
I see
Yep.
it.
Yep.
This was Grand Rapids' schedule for kind of the middle of summer, this coming summer, as of early March. So this is what the world would have looked like had not COVID-19 come around. And as I mentioned previously, a lot of this is if we see Grand Rapids as providing us different opportunities or different options or better options, it all depends on the timing. So I'm first going to, this spreadsheet has two sides, and arrivals and departures. So I'm going to try to scale this such that there. So these are the columns that we're looking at. Can everyone see what I'm showing?
I'm seeing a G and an H and an I and a J right now, those columns.
Okay, so F,
And an F,
okay, you should see. So F is time,
right?
and then these are the departures out of Grand Rapids. So you got city code, line, and then actually I brought up the wrong schedule. I'm gonna close that and bring up a different one. If I can find it. This one. Share.
Still looking at an F, a G, H, I, and J. Now I'm looking at an A, B, C, D, E, F.
Yep. So
Yeah. There's a G there too. I got a G.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to scroll over because the left-hand side is arrivals. The right-hand side is departures. I want to start with the departures.
Okay.
Okay. It should be back to F to G. Let me go back to the top.
Okay, G is we have G,
Yep.
H, I, J, K.
Okay. I think I can expand this out a little bit. So what this is showing is the departures out of Grand Rapids. So depending on when we get into Grand Rapids, this then would have given us an understanding as to what connections have been available in any given window. So you'll see what we have on the screen right now is basically the first departure out of Grand Rapids is at 5 a.m. And there's a big bank of departures that goes through, roughly 8 a.m.
30.
A little bit after 8. So for us to take advantage of this list of about probably 20 different cities, we need to be into Grand Rapids in time to catch these flights. You generally should allow no less than 30 minutes to connect. So we would need to be in 30 minutes before any particular flight, and then roughly allocate a 30-minute flight time. So you're talking a departure out of here an hour before, a connection window. So for us to get these 5 a.m. flights, I'm not even considering because that would mean we'd need to leave here between, around 4 a.m. So you can start thinking 6 a.m. So to get into Grand Rapids, to catch a 6 a.m. flight, we need to leave here at 5 a.m. Also, and again, I'll say this is, while that may work for some people, I think having, especially in the winter, 2 flights a day, having the one flight leave at 5 a.m. is going to deter a number of people from wanting to use that flight. It's just very early in the morning. Some people won't. It's just very early in the morning. And traditionally, the with a flight schedule that has 2 flights a day, you're going to have basically a round trip in the morning and then a round trip in the evening. So this morning departure is going to be the flight that will allow people to utilize our service to the greatest extent, because they're going to get either into Grand Rapids early in the morning, and thus then Chicago probably an hour later after that flight continues to Chicago. And then you've basically got, the entire morning set of connections you basically connect through. This would be the flight outbound that would be where I would expect the majority of our passengers want to take. A 5 a.m. departure is basically saying, we're basically going to, our one primary departure a day is now a time that's going to be challenging for, I'd say, families, for, groups of leisure travelers. It may be ideal for a business traveler because, they want to get to their location as early as possible and get as much done that day, so they're not wasting valuable time traveling. Leisure travelers have a tendency to do it differently. The second round trip departure out would probably be late in the day. So let's say it's 7 o'clock at night. From a connection standpoint, leaving here at 7 is not going to give you as many options to connect to, and it's going to get you into your final destination 10, 11, 12 at night. So that probably also isn't ideal for families, leisure travelers. They tend to like to fly in the middle of the day. Now, in the
Barry,
summer, when we have
when I'm looking at this, am I looking at, are these all the AM flights, 5:45 a.m. all the way to 8:05 a.m.?
Yes, these are the AM departures out of Grand Rapids.
So why are we picking 6 a.m.? Why not? I mean, we do another rotation through Austin, Minneapolis, New York, Chicago at 7.
I'm just talking about theoretically, and then I'm going to go to the data.
All right.
Morning, with 2 flights a day for 6 months of the year, we're going to have a morning departure, evening departure. That morning departure is going to be our more desirable one. What I'm suggesting is to get this entire bank of flights starting at 6, 5 a.m. departure, I don't think is in our best interest. Especially also because it then makes those that want to go to Chicago to catch a flight there, they're adding a stop, adding probably 45 minutes to an hour to that, making that a less desirable option, a one stop to Chicago.
Right, I would say it'd be at least another hour.
As Karen is pointing out, obviously we don't have to go that early because there's a whole bank here. Let's kind of go the other extreme and say we want a reasonable departure out of Manistee.
Say
And
9 o'clock.
what
Say
time?
9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock.
8:30. So if you took that as a departure out, I'll just say 8. Let's start with 8.
Okay.
So if we depart out of here at 8, we get into Grand Rapids at 8:30, half-hour connection, you can now start looking at flights 9 o'clock or later. And if you get in at 8:30, generally a rule of thumb is a reasonable connection is anything 4 hours or less. So the 8:30 basically takes you to 12:30. So now,
There's nothing there right now.
and that's, so basically what you get then is, okay, I can get on United to Chicago. Well,
Hooray.
we have Chicago already, so that's not something. You can get to Minneapolis, so that's a valid connection. You can get to Detroit, but chances are Detroit isn't going to be your final destination. You're going on Delta because you're then going to connect. So now all you've really accomplished is you've got to choose a different carrier instead of United or Chicago out of United or American out of Chicago. You now have Delta as an option, but you're adding an extra stop to accomplish that. Midway, this the last column here are which day these flights occur. So that's just a 1 flight a week. But actually then the one below it is actually 5 days a week. So you can get to Midway, but again, you're then flying to Chicago via one stop when you could have had a nonstop. O'Hare again, Atlanta on Delta. So that is a valid connection. So from my perspective, Minneapolis and Atlanta are 2 valid cities. Orlando, 2 days a week.
Right.
And then Newark. So now you basically got New York, Atlanta, Minneapolis, and a couple flights a week to Orlando. And that's basically it.
Can you scroll us up further if we left out of here at 3 o'clock for the afternoon stuff, Barry, doing the same thing?
So, yep. And again, that's why I just kind of,
Yeah, I understand where you're going.
areas just to kind of, if our goal is to have additional options, what those might look like. And as I kind of prefix with this was pre-pandemic. So this is probably would be, and this was summer, so this would probably be best case scenario.
Right, it'd probably be at least 40%
For
less.
options, it might even be less.
Right,
So a 3 o'clock. So
it'd put us in at 1,600 there.
so if you start at
4 o'clock,
15 and
1,600, yeah.
go down to roughly 20, so 4 hours. No, they're a little more spread out. So you've got, again, some sprinkling of Florida stuff. And again, that depends. Allegiant, it's, they only fly 1 or 2 days a week to any given destination. You've got 1 day a week to Denver here. Minneapolis, again, is a good connection. Denver here, nonstops on United, good connections. And Charlotte on American. I skipped over Newark. So many of the same, but a couple additional ones. So you're getting a couple of the additional legacy carriers hubs. So you're getting Denver and United, Newark, and Charlotte. A little bit of Florida again, and then Baltimore, Washington on Southwest. And, continuing on, much the same is generally the way Grand Rapids is you've got those big banks morning, big banks evening coming back. And then throughout the day, you've got periodic flights on United, American, and Delta to their hubs, which for United and American, the majority of those are to Chicago, although they do sprinkle in some of their other hubs. And for Delta, you've got Detroit, Minneapolis, and Atlanta, their 3 hubs sprinkled throughout the day.
So we're not picking up very many options other than Chicago, which we would have already been going to anyway.
Well, you're
I
getting,
get the picture.
you're getting Minneapolis, you're getting Atlanta, you're getting Delta's hubs, which is something you probably can also get out of O'Hare. Delta obviously flies into O'Hare. It's not a hub like American and United are, but you don't get a lot else. You get a few Allegiant Florida destinations. Looking at, again, this is a summer schedule. Winter would probably be different because Florida would be more prevalent in that than it is in the middle of summer. So that's
I think it's a real gamble to plan on that schedule holding out too.
now. Look, I kind of
You're right, Barry.
a little bit about the inbound because you kind of got the opposite effect of you need to get to Grand Rapids before a flight. On the return, you need to leave Grand Rapids after the flight. And, kind of, again, starting in the morning, there aren't a lot of inbound flights. In fact, there are a lot of inbound flights in the morning if you consider between midnight and 1 a.m. That's kind of the last flights coming in from all the major carriers hubs. So you see Chicago, Denver, Charlotte, Atlanta, Minneapolis, all coming in. But again, if you paint the worst case picture there, you wanted to leave as late as possible to pick up all of those things. You're talking a 1 a.m. departure out of Grand Rapids to get into here at 1:30. Again, not what is really going to be conducive to, peak travel numbers. But, again, throughout the middle of the day, it's very similar to the arrivals. And like the departures were, the arrivals, you have this big block at the end of the day, starting at 9 p.m., running through till 1 a.m., where basically all of those flights that went out between 6 and 8 in the morning are now coming back between 9 and 1 at night. So my concern is
We're not gaining much.
Grand Rapids doesn't have potential. And I would feel somewhat different if we were talking, maybe boutique here, where they had 3 flights a day in the winter versus only 2. I think with 3 flights a day, you've got a little bit more ability to gamble on, a trial like this. With only 2 flights a day, I believe we are sacrificing potential success in building up Chicago. And so that's what I wanted to say on this. Now, my final opinion on this is, I think now is the wrong time to be experimenting. And I think if we do a 2-year contract, which is, I'm assuming, the direction the board will take, I think 2 years from now, after the new normal has set in, after we've got a good working relationship with Cape Air, and after we kind of really understand how this might work, that I believe would be a good time to do a trial like this. Now, having said that, and I, will, not necessarily put words in Jeff's mouth, but I'm in some ways going to, now might be a better opportunity to get DOT to agree to something that is outside the box, just because it seems that the federal government's pocketbook is wider open now than it has been in a while. And therefore we might miss an opportunity to kind of secure a level of direction or a level of service in this window, just because we're not asking for it, or we are asking for it now versus later. So, like any decision, this isn't something that is 100% black or white. There's a lot of gray. I just have some concerns in looking at some of this data.
So Barry, are you saying that basically let's talk to the state and ask if they would be willing to support some creative approaches that we might make with extra money? Is that what you're kind of talking about now?
No, I'm not saying that, because it's not the state. This is federal government.
Feds.
And B, we're not in a position to be negotiating per se, because ultimately the bids are what Cape Air submitted. So those are the options that DOT has to choose between without going out to rebid. If they, they didn't like any of them, you have to then provide an opportunity for all bidders to rebid. You just can't choose a carrier and then negotiate a new bid. They don't.
I got it. Yeah.
I sent out a couple messages to the group, and one of them was that, when I went through this, my first thought was working with persons on Chicago. This is where we're going. This is where we'd like to be. I agree. Right now, we cannot say that everything's going to happen in Grand Rapids. We don't know what Grand Rapids is going to look like 6 months from now. So I still stick with Cape Air and say, bring them in. They know that we want Grand Rapids, but they also know that we're going through COVID and that we don't even know what Grand Rapids will look like. So it would be a process. come on in, do our Chicago runs, and then work with us on how we can change it. You know, maybe by next summer, they'd be willing to negotiate or add it in the contract or do something. But I think it needs analysis. We just can't do it right now. It needs analysis. Nobody knows what we're going to look like 6 months from now, 8 months from now.
Karen, very good. That sounds very logical. One more comment when I was thinking about that. In fact, I was talking about this potential for an early morning flight going to Grand Rapids to catch this early bank of planes that Barry's talking about. And I was talking to this with my wife, and she says, if somebody's going to go down there to catch a 6:30 or 7 o'clock plane out of Grand Rapids, what are most people going to do? And I says, go down the night before, stay in a hotel, then catch it in the morning. And she says, exactly. So I know I've done that before, and I know other people have done that. So that early bank of flights out of Grand Rapids, I don't think is going to gain us much at all.
And obviously, we don't know if we don't try. So
Correct.
there is something to be said for, you know, rolling the dice and trying. There's not a huge amount of downside. But I just think given the uncertainty of the environment and where aviation will be, I think my opinion is that we need to focus on what we think will generate the most passengers in the next 2 years. And I don't think the risk or the uncertainty of Grand Rapids is the best way to accomplish that. But again, that's just my one opinion, and I really should shut up now because I've already said too much.
Well, anybody who isn't going to Grand Rapids for a purpose, those early and late extremes on the flight times are going to put them off. They're not going to like it.
Correct.
Barry, this is Andrew. Just had a quick question. If we were to go and ask for proposal 2 and they say yes, is there still room to modify that to where when you're saying during the summer that we have the 4 flights and during the winter with 2, we just don't go to Grand Rapids during the winter? I know if we go with proposal 1, then my understanding is there is no option for Grand Rapids during that 2-year contract.
Correct. That's my understanding too.
Yep.
So what Ms. Goodman's suggesting, if we go with proposal 1, that's not an option to even test it next summer because you'd have to wait until the 2-year contract's up.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna weigh in. I agree with the uncertainty of what's going on currently. The Grand Rapids option probably is not a great one because of the pandemic. I disagree with the scheduling aspect, but again, that's a moot point at the moment. I do think we probably ought to go with option 1. Again, we always seem to be focusing on Chicago as opposed to other routes, and I just always want to bring everybody back. When we had our 10 months of heyday, we were flying into Milwaukee, and we always seem to focus back to Chicago, and we all know the concern with Chicago is the reliability of O'Hare.
The other thing about this team, this Cape Air group, I would say, okay, here's option 1, but let me pull you in right now, and we want to discuss with you the fact that we want something different. And this is a team that will take on challenges. From what I could see, they're motivated and they have the ability to kind of think outside the box. So give the problem to them. Say, we're going to do this, but we're not going to give up on things like Milwaukee. We're not going to give up on things on like Grand Rapids or even Detroit. I mean, we're looking for options. We want you here. We want you helping us to do this. I would say that to them right out of the gate.
In fact, if I recall, I think one of their staff that talked to us the other day was home based in the Chicago area to work on situations and plans and so on for bringing the aircraft or the company into the Midwest more.
Jerry, you're referring to the person, it's their marketing manager for the Midwest region. she's not based in Chicago, and I shouldn't.
Somewhere around there.
The conversation I've had with her, she told me where she's based, but she is Midwest based.
Okay, that's, I just wanted to do it. One thing that I'm just thinking that we are all talking about going to Chicago. I think we're going to Chicago to O'Hare this time versus Midway. And that's going to have a positive impact going into O'Hare versus Midway. I think we're all kind of overlooking that.
Well, and Jerry, and you can argue that point both ways. There are pros to Midway, there are pros to O'Hare. There are cons to Midway and cons to O'Hare. I think the cons to O'Hare, and I hear this from in conversations with Jeff and others, that O'Hare is more prone to cancellations and delays.
Correct. I understand that. That's something there.
20 days a year, there are going to be 20 days a year where there are going to be more problems out of O'Hare than probably any other airports that we could be using. You can't ignore that. That is a true fact.
Correct. But on the reverse of that, you've got the 365 minus 20 days of the year where you've got easier connections in Chicago.
Correct. And the other negative factor about O'Hare is that for the infrequent traveler, it can be intimidating because it is one of the largest airports.
Right.
And that is a factor for those that are infrequent travelers. And that's not to say that that's not a good portion of our general population. But the pros, as you're talking about, there's 340 days a year where it is obviously the most connections available anywhere in the world from regional airports. And that scale does provide opportunities for hooking up with a variety of carriers, including low-fare carriers like Spirit and Frontier. Not Allegiant, but it's a different set of low-fare carriers.
Okay, I think we've chewed on this for a fair amount, and I don't think we're going to go any further than where we're at. So I think let's just go ahead and make a decision here. Option 1, option 2, and go forward. Mark, option 1, option 2.
Give me a summary on the two again.
So option 1 in Cape Air's proposal is Chicago only, $3.6 million. Option 2 is Cape Air's proposal that includes 1 round trip a day, 1 stopping through Grand Rapids at $4.8 million.
Okay, what would you recommend?
I think we're at the point now of asking what your thoughts are.
Right.
Yeah. I'd go with the second option, I guess.
Okay. Phil?
I would go with option 1, simply because I don't think we want to complicate matters much for the traveling public. And with the COVID-19, we got to kind of look at this. I think that we're kind of sort of starting from scratch again.
Correct.
My thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay. Barry?
I'd go with option 1.
Okay, option 1. Okay. Barry?
Let's say option 1.
Okay. Jeff?
I'm good with 1 for now.
Okay.
I'll be going wholeheartedly for option 2 in the future if I'm around.
Well, keep in mind, I think one of the things I was gonna go with option 1, but I was also gonna go and ask Barry if we can't, like Karen said, kind of pave the path for something going into Grand Rapids or some other variation down the road.
I agree. I think Cape Air, as Karen stated it very well, I think they have got enough game and they'd be willing to do the best they can for their customers. I do want to share with everybody, I just got an email back from Remy Fortin with Congressman Berkman's office, and he said they would be willing to entertain option 2, for lack of better terms. But again, we probably need to stick with 1 for now because of the uncertainty.
Sounds good. Karen?
I'd go for option 1.
Okay. And Andrew?
Option 1.
Okay. Barry, did you catch everybody? I believe we're all talking option 1 with some feelers for out down the road for
Yep. And
adjusting something down the road to Grand Rapids.
that makes a lot of sense.
You probably need a motion, Jerry, for this, I'm going to guess, huh?
Yep, I was just gonna say,
I would say that. Okay.
I'll make that motion.
The
I'll
motion,
support it.
the motion is to go with Cape Air, option 1, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's do a roll call on this. Julie? Hello?
You're muted.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dunce,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Struda.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Barry, I have one more request of the board.
Go ahead.
And I'm assuming that the board is also requesting me to put together a letter to DOT summarizing your wishes that you just voted on, as I've done in the past.
Your wish is our command.
And late last week, I had some thoughts on how to word that letter. And in anticipation, I actually reached out to both of the airlines we were talking about today, both Boutique and Cape Air, just making sure that they would be supportive of what I'm about to mention. And they both said, yes, that made complete sense. We are coming off with alternate essential air service of having the really great flexibility in how our schedule is laid out to meet our seasonal demands. And both carriers put in their proposals some seasonal flexibility, but I would say neither proposal really fully addresses our historic demand. Of course, our historic demand may no longer be relevant because who knows what the future of air travel is. But assuming that, you know, we still always have Forest Festival around the 4th of July, and we can pretty much sell every seat we could fly around that week, regardless of, you know, what other periods of the summer hold. What I've requested of the carriers, and I would basically request your support for in communicating with DOT, is that we ask DOT to write their contract, and that's not the right word, but it's the word that pops into my head right now, for air service with Cape Air, in this case, since that's your choice, to basically allow the carrier ultimate flexibility in the following range: a minimum of 12 flights a week and a maximum of 36 flights. Cape Air's proposal is 14 and 28, but basically a little bit wider range for them to work with the community to basically adjust the schedule as best fits the community, as opposed to what exactly is proposed: 6 months of this, 6 months of this. Falling within their number of bid flights per year of, I don't have the number right in front of me, but there's a number there that you take the 6 months of each, calculate out, you end up with X number of flights. So that is the maximum number of flights, but allow flexibility within a wider range, such that potentially in the summer we might get a little bit more than 4 a day. In September, maybe a little bit less. Around Christmas, a little bit more than 2. January and February, maybe a little bit less. The ability for us to work with them to really tailor something that matches as close our demand as possible, but still falling within the same total number of flights and the same dollar amount.
So keep the historical demand that we've had, but reserve some for opportunities that develop.
I wouldn't phrase it exactly that way, but that is kind of the sense, yes.
What you're talking about, Barry, is you're talking about widen the scope you're talking about with Cape Air to give us more flexibility.
Right. So
Right.
for example, with Cape Air,
Right.
currently, and how they talk in their answers to questions, their summer, they're looking at 28 flights a week.
Right. Right.
With the number of crews they have here, they could operate 32 flights a week without incurring additional costs. So that gives them a little bit of upside there. And maybe that makes sense for 4 or 5 weeks in July. And then they can save some of those flights in maybe May or September, bring those down a little bit. It just gives a little bit more flexibility in the schedule, because ultimately, and I think I mentioned this in my summary, boutique schedule, which kind of has 3 ranges, kind of an off season, a mid season, and a peak season, matches our flow a little bit better than Cape Air, which was kind of off and on. I'm just asking, that DOT grant them the capability to maybe give it a little bit more, because, Cape Air coming in, making this proposal, they don't know our market. They don't know, is 6 months of 4 weeks the right number, or should it have been 5? I just looking for a little bit of flexibility, but I don't feel I have the authority to approach DOT in a formal response without the board's support on this idea.
I'm going to say I recognize what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And if you would like a vote on that.
I would like that, yes.
Okay. Do I hear somebody making a proposal to allow Barry to go ahead and expand out this scheduling arrangement with Cape Air to best suit our needs?
I'll make a motion for that presentation.
Okay. Barry, did I kind of say that right for you?
I'll just provide a couple of, I think, the specifics that the total number of flights and total subsidy match the carrier's bid. So we're not changing their bid.
Correct.
That we allow the carrier flexibility between a minimum of 12 flights a week and a maximum of 36.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay, sounds good. Do I hear a second for that?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Who
Julie,
just said, who seconded?
Phil-
Okay,
Phil said seconds.
okay.
Julie, can we have a roll call on that?
Mr. Shuda,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom.
Yes.
Okay. Barry, anything else?
Nope, all I have. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments? Otherwise, I will go ahead and close the meeting for today. And thank you all for coming and attending.
Jerry, I just have one quick question for Barry. Is there any update on Reith Riley?
Oh, okay.
Everything seems to be tracking according to the planned timeline, which is starting May 26th. So yes, everything seems to be going, unless the governor throws in something that would prohibit it. It seems that everything's on track.
I've got a question. I've got a question for you, Barry, and that is there any chance of the possibility of Cape Air taking over from North Country at a much sooner pace than after after the fiscal year starts?
We could entertain that. We would have to pursue basically terminating our agreement with public charters. So I think there is, looking back at
There's ground.
months, there was grounds for that. So, um, so
Okay.
that I can't say that that's not. I would need to obviously reach out to Cape Air and understand what their capability of starting sooner would be.
Why don't we do, you can reach out to them, Barry, and ask them that. But I would say that we want to go ahead and get them in our pockets first. To get this program going that we just all agreed to. See where that goes. And then at the same time, ask them whether they can step in earlier with our, so that we can go ahead and get rid of our current carrier.
I would recommend that this is something to talk about at our regular meeting later this month.
Well, let's do that. That'll be in 2 weeks, so.
I can have more information and conversations with Cape Air between now and then on this topic.
Jeff, does that sound okay?
Yep.
Okay.
I want to put it on the table is all.
Okay. Okay.
So Barry, are you going to look at some opportunities there at this our next board meeting then, and kind of provide a little leadership on that, or not?
I will attempt to, yes. I will at least have additional information.
Thanks.
Okay, any other comments? Otherwise,
On schedule for Saturday still?
Well, we're in a real strange environment right now, and I can understand why we have to maybe be a little conservative and try to keep things normal as much as possible. But it's going to be a roller coaster ride, that's how I see it.
Barry, you had a question?
Firefighting is still scheduled for the training on Saturday?
Yes, the training is still scheduled for Saturday.
All right, I might drop in and take a peek at that.
Okay.
I forgot about that.
I wish I could tell you what time it's planning to start. It's either 8 or 9, and I don't know. I can't remember which it is right now. So
Gail, I think Gail's saying 10.
10. Okay. Thank you, Gail. You're the one that does know that because I delegated that to you. So.
Oh.
Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.